I never thought I'd be the type of person who would record a family dinner conversation that desperate times call for desperate measures. My name is Emma Wilson, though sometimes I wonder if I'll ever truly feel like I bear that name rightfully. At 34, I built what I thought was a beautiful life with my husband Robert, a brilliant surgeon with kind eyes that still make my heart skip after 7 years together. But those same kind eyes would cloud with conflict whenever his mother, Martha, entered the picture. The woman has always made it clear that I was an unwelcome addition to the prestigious Wilson family, with their old money and even older prejudices. But nothing could have prepared me for that fateful dinner at her sprawling colonial mansion last spring. She raised her crystal wine glass, locked eyes with me across the mahogany table, and announced to everyone present, Asterisk, you'll never be a real Wilson. You're not real family. The words hung in the air like poison, seeping into every corner of the room as the other guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation as tears threatened to spill, but I maintained my composure. Years of nursing training helping me keep a professional face, even as my heart shattered inside my chest. What Martha didn't know, as she smiled triumphantly at my discomfort, was that my phone was recording in my purse, capturing every syllable of her cruelty. Growing up in my modest home in rural Ohio, where my parents worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, I learned early that nothing in life comes easily. I put myself through nursing school, paid off my student loans, and built a career I was proud of through sheer determination. Martha, with her inherited wealth and social connections, couldn't understand what it meant to earn your place in the world. As I sat there absorbing her verbal slap, I realized something fundamental. Real family isn't defined by a last name or a mention in a will. It's defined by love, respect, and loyalty, none of which Martha had ever shown me. Robert and I met at a medical conference in Chicago 6 years ago. I was attending as part of the nursing staff from Cleveland Memorial, while he was presenting research on innovative cardiac surgical techniques. Our eyes met across a crowded conference hall, and by the end of the evening, we were sharing coffee and conversation that flowed so naturally it felt like we'd known each other forever. Our relationship progressed quickly. Weekends spent driving between our cities, late night phone calls, and within 6 months, I had relocated to be with him. Despite the intensity of our connection, Robert was strangely hesitant about introducing me to his family, particularly his mother. She can be a bit much. He'd warned, but his nervous expression suggested something deeper than typical family quirks. When we finally met, Martha Wilson was impeccably dressed in a tailored Chanel suit, her silver hair perfectly coiffed. Her home was a showcase of antiques and old money elegance. Her smile never reached her eyes as she assessed me from head to toe. "So you're the nurse Robert's been telling us about," she said, emphasizing nurse as if it were a curious occupation like a sword swallower or a professional mourner. How refreshing to meet someone so practical. Throughout that first dinner, Martha peppered me with questions about my simple upbringing, responding to each answer with how interesting, in a tone that suggested it was anything but. She slipped in constant references to family traditions that predate the Civil War, and casually mentioned the private schools all Wilsons attended for generations. Robert sat beside me, occasionally squeezing my hand, but never interrupting his mother's subtle interrogation. In the following months, I made countless efforts to win Martha's approval. I brought thoughtful gifts, offered to help with her charity gala, researched her favorite authors so we might have common ground for conversation. She accepted my offerings with cool politeness while continuing to find ways to exclude me. The family photo shoot during the 4th of July celebration was the first undeniable slight. "Oh, Emma dear, this is just for the Wilson family Christmas card," she explained sweetly when I stepped aside. You understand. I watched as Robert joined the portrait without protest. Later, when I expressed my hurt feelings, he sighed. Mom's just traditional, Emma. She doesn't mean anything by it. The Christmas card has always been just blood relatives. That night, as I lay awake beside him, I couldn't just shake the feeling that this wasn't merely an isolated incident, but the beginning of a pattern that would define my place in Robert's life. Our engagement announcement was met with Martha's thin-lipped smile and immediate suggestions about appropriate venues for a Wilson wedding. What should have been months of joy quickly devolved into a battleground of wills. The plaza has held Wilson weddings for 3 generations, Martha insisted, dismissing my dreams of a more intimate, meaningful ceremony. She commandeered the guest list, adding hundreds of family connections I'd never met, while limiting my side to immediate family only. We simply can't accommodate everyone at such a prestigious venue, she explained when I protested. Then came the prenuptial agreement, presented under the guise of concern. It's not personal, Emma, Martha said, sliding the document across her desk. It's about protecting the Wilson legacy. I'm sure someone from your background understands the importance of financial security. Robert stood by silently, eventually taking me aside to whisper, it's easier if we just go along with it, but it doesn't change how I feel about you. I signed the papers, swallowing my pride, telling myself it was a small price for our future together. On our wedding day, Martha arrived in an off-white designer gown that photographed nearly identical to mine. In the wedding pictures, we looked like twin brides. During her toast, she raised her glass with practiced elegance. To Robert and Emma, may she grow into the Wilson name and the responsibilities it carries. The room applauded while I sat frozen, the hidden barb piercing through my wedding day happiness. Shortly after we returned from our honeymoon, Martha presented us with a check for the down payment on a house in her neighborhood. A wedding gift, she called it, though the strings attached became immediately apparent. She had keys made for herself without asking, appearing unannounced to check on her investment. She critiqued everything, from my choice of curtains to the way I organized the kitchen cabinets. Wilson women have always arranged their homes this way, became her common refrain. When I attempted to redecorate the living room, Martha reminded us that family money had purchased the house, suggesting I should be grateful rather than assertive. One afternoon, I returned early from a shift to find Martha rifling through my personal correspondence in our bedroom. Just tidying up, she claimed, though the open letters in her hand told a different story. That night, I confronted Robert in tears. Your mother doesn't respect me or our marriage. She treats me like an intruder in our home. Robert ran his hands through his hair, frustration evident on his face. I'll talk to her, I promise. She means well, she just has trouble letting go. That conversation never happened. Or if it did, nothing changed. Martha's presence in our lives remained a constant shadow, her disapproval seeping into the foundation of our marriage as persistently as water eroding stone. As my marriage to Robert continued, I began to understand the full extent of Martha's influence, not just over us, but the entire extended Wilson family. Martha wasn't merely wealthy. She was the unquestioned matriarch, controlling a fortune that included real estate across 3 states, significant stock portfolios, and partial ownership in several successful businesses. Her late husband had been a shrewd investor who'd substantially grown his inherited wealth, and upon his death 15 years ago, Martha had taken control of everything with surprising financial acumen. What I hadn't realized was how deliberately she wielded this wealth as a tool for family control. Was how deliberately she wielded this wealth as a tool for family control. At a Wilson family reunion, I met Robert's cousin Diane. who pulled me aside after several glasses of wine and removed from his position in the family business. Another cousin had been excluded from family gatherings for years after choosing a career Martha deemed unsuitable. I began to observe Robert more carefully after that, noticing how his decisions always seemed to factor in his mother's potential reaction. He turned down a prestigious fellowship because it would have required relocating away from his mother's sphere of influence. He consulted her before making any significant purchase or career move. "It's complicated, Emma," he'd explain whenever I questioned this dynamic. Asterisk, the family business has certain expectations. My father built all this for us to continue. One Christmas, Martha orchestrated an elaborate gift exchange at her estate. She presented each family member with thoughtfully extravagant gifts: a Rolex for Robert's brother, a designer handbag for his sister, custom golf clubs for a cousin. When my turn came, she handed me a generic gift card to a department store with a dismissive asterisk. "I wasn't sure what someone like you would appreciate." The contrast was unmistakable and intentional. That night, lying in bed in the guest room of Martha's mansion, I whispered to Robert asterisk, "I don't think I'll ever belong in your family." He pulled me close, murmuring reassurances, but he didn't contradict my statement. Later, I found myself staring in the bathroom mirror, wondering if perhaps Martha was right. Maybe I didn't belong. Maybe I never would. The thought settled in my chest like a cold stone, and for the first time, I questioned whether love alone was enough to sustain a marriage so entwined with wealth and family expectations I hadn't been born into. 2 years into our marriage, Robert and I decided to start a family. When we shared our plans with Martha over dinner at her home, her eyebrows arched perfectly as she set down her fork. Asterisk, "Are you sure you're ready for this responsibility, Robert? Children change everything, and your surgical career is just taking off." Asterisk, her gaze slid to me. Asterisk, "And Emma dear, parenthood is quite demanding, nothing like your nursing shifts." Nevertheless, we proceeded with our plans, and I was overjoyed when I discovered I was pregnant 3 months later. My pregnancy was difficult from the start. Severe morning sickness kept me hospitalized briefly during my first trimester, and I developed concerning blood pressure issues that required me to reduce my working hours. Martha began calling Robert's siblings and extended family, voice dripping with concern. Asterisk, "Emma seems to be having such a hard time." Between us, I think she might be exaggerating for attention. You know how people without proper family backgrounds sometimes struggle with the spotlight not being on them. These comments made their way back to me through sympathetic relatives, cutting deeply during a time when I was already physically vulnerable. When I was 5 months along, Martha announced she was planning my baby shower. "Don't worry about a thing," she insisted, waving away my input. The event she organized was held at her country club, attended almost exclusively by her friends, women 3 decades, my senior, who spoke about me in the third person, even when I was standing right beside them. The gifts were monogrammed with the Wilson family crest rather than the simple, practical items I had registered for. After the shower, Martha arrived at our home with workers who began assembling an ornate nursery set. I had specifically said I didn't want it. "This has been in the Wilson family for generations," she proclaimed, as the antique crib was positioned in the center of what had been my home office. Asterisk, "Every Wilson baby has slept in this crib." When I mentioned safety concerns about the antique, she dismissed me with a laugh. Asterisk, "Wilson babies have survived just fine without modern coddling." A week later, Martha called to inform us she'd established a trust fund for our unborn child. "I've arranged it so that Robert will have sole control as trustee," she explained. Asterisk, "It's a substantial sum, so we need someone with Wilson financial sense managing it." At a family dinner shortly after, I overheard Martha speaking to her sister in the kitchen. "The baby will be a real Wilson, even if its mother isn't," she said. unaware I was approaching. Asterisk, Robert's genes will win out, thankfully. 7 months into my pregnancy, I developed preeclampsia, requiring strict bed rest. Martha arrived unannounced at our home daily, ostensibly to help, though her assistance consisted mainly of rearranging my carefully prepared baby items and questioning my doctor's orders. Asterisk, in my day, women didn't make such a fuss about pregnancy. Asterisk, she commented while moving the hospital bag I'd packed. After one particularly exhausting day, where my blood pressure had spiked dangerously, Martha suggested to Robert that perhaps I wasn't too physically suited for motherhood and offered to help him find a more qualified nanny, asterisk, since Emma will clearly struggle with the demands of caring for an infant. Asterisk, that night, I broke down completely, sobbing in Robert's arms. Your mother's trying to push me out of my own childless life before they were even born, asterisk, I cried. Robert held me, murmuring that I was being oversensitive, that pregnancy hormones were affecting my perspective. For the first time, as I lay awake that night, feeling my baby kick inside me, I seriously contemplated whether staying in this marriage was the right choice for me and my child, our daughter. Lily came into the world after 26 hours of labor, a perfect 7-pound bundle with Robert's dark hair and my green eyes. The moment they placed her on my chest, I felt a fierce love and protectiveness I'd never experienced before. Robert wept beside me, overwhelmed with joy, and for a few precious hours, we existed in a bubble of new parent bliss. That bubble burst when Martha swept into my hospital room without knocking, designer handbag swinging, while I was attempting to breastfeed for the first time with the help of a lactation consultant. There's my granddaughter, she announced, approaching the bed with outstretched arms, clearly expecting me to hand over my newborn immediately. When I didn't, explaining that we were in the middle of an important feeding session, her face tightened. Asterisk, well, I suppose those natural approaches are fine to try. But Wilson babies have always thrived on formula, much more practical for professional women. Asterisk, throughout my 3-day hospital stay, Martha's visits became increasingly intrusive. She arrived each morning before visiting hours officially began, having somehow charmed her way past hospital security. She referred to herself as the real mother figure when speaking to nurses, asking for updates on Lily's progress as though I were merely an incidental surrogate. I raised 2 children successfully, she informed a young nurse within my hearing. Asterisk, my daughter-in-law is new to all this, of course, coming from her background. When I expressed to Robert how uncomfortable her behavior made me, he simply said, asterisk, she is excited, Emma. It's her first grandchild. Once we brought Lily home, Martha's presence became nearly constant. She would arrive unannounced, often using her key to enter while I was napping with the baby. I'd wake to find her holding Lily, having taken her from the bassinet beside me, without permission. She rearranged the nursery repeatedly, replaced the pediatrician-recommended baby products I'd purchased with traditional alternatives she preferred, and criticized everything from the room temperature to how I swaddled my daughter. Lily is so lucky I'm here, she would say, bouncing my baby in her arms while looking at me critically. Asterisk, a grandmother's experience is invaluable. 6 weeks postpartum, I walked into our kitchen to find Martha showing off Lily to one of her friends who had stopped by without invitation. Here's my baby, Martha cooed proudly, displaying Lily as though she'd given birth to her herself. When I gently took Lily back, mentioning it was time for her feeding, Martha's friend asked if I'd be returning to work soon, and who would care for the baby then. Before I could answer, Martha interjected, asterisk, I'll be taking over, of course. Emma's quite career-focused, but I've arranged my schedule to provide proper Wilson upbringing. I was still processing this presumption when, the following weekend, Martha took Lily for what was supposed to be a brief grandmother bonding time. She returned hours later than agreed, and I discovered, with horror, that my 3-month-old daughter now had pierced ears, tiny gold studs glinting under the nursery light. All Wilson women have their ears pierced as babies, Martha declared when confronted, showing no remorse for making this permanent decision without our consent. What followed was my most serious breakdown yet. I locked myself in our bedroom and called my mother in tears, while Robert pounded on the door, demanding I stop overreacting. When I finally emerged, I made my position clear. Asterisk, your mother has crossed every boundary possible. Either you start standing up to her, or I'm taking Lily to stay with my parents until you figure out where your priorities lie. Asterisk, faced with this ultimatum, Robert finally acknowledged the problem, though his promised confrontation with his mother was still weeks away. Robert chose a Sunday brunch at a neutral restaurant to have the talk with his mother about boundaries. I stayed home with Lily, anxiously awaiting the outcome. He returned 3 hours later, looking drained. She cried, he reported, slumping onto our sofa. Asterisk, said she was just trying to help, that she felt unappreciated after everything she's done for us. According to Robert, he'd managed to extract promises from Martha to call before visiting and to respect our parenting decisions. The change lasted approximately 2 weeks. Martha's behavior improved dramatically whenever Robert was present. She would call first, bring thoughtful gifts, and even compliment my mothering skills. But the moment he left for work, the facade dropped. She would critique my appearance. Asterisk, you really should make more effort now that you're a Wilson wife. She would question my parenting choices directly. Asterisk, Lily seems fussy. Have you considered you might be doing something wrong? And Robert and I make our decisions together based on what works for our asterisk family unit. Perhaps it was my calm response. Perhaps it was the supportive nod from Robert's sister down the table, but something in Martha snapped. Her carefully maintained social veneer cracked, revealing the contempt beneath. Asterisk, your family unit? She repeated, her voice taking on an edge that caused several guests to glance at each other uncomfortably. Asterisk, let's be clear about something, Emma. Asterisk, Robert and Lily are Wilsons. They come from a legacy of importance and achievement. You married into this family, but that doesn't make you one of us. Asterisk, she set down her glass with precision. Asterisk, you'll never be a real Wilson. You're not real family. You're an outsider who caught my son's attention, but blood is what matters in the end. Asterisk, the room went deadly silent. I looked toward Robert, waiting, praying for him to defend me, to say anything at all. He stared at his plate. His face flushed, but remained silent. Martha, emboldened by his tacit compliance, continued. Asterisk, I've been meeting with my estate planners. Lily's inheritance will be secured in a trust, one that Robert will manage. That way, we can ensure the Wilson legacy remains protected and in the proper hands. Asterisk, every word was a calculated blow designed to reinforce my outsider status. To diminish me in front of everyone who mattered to Robert, I sat motionless. Years of nursing training helping me maintain a professional facade. But internally, I felt something fundamental break. After several excruciating moments of silence, I quietly excused myself, picked up my purse, and walked with measured steps toward the powder room. Once inside, I leaned against the hand-painted wallpaper, drew a deep breath, and stopped the recording app on my phone. The entire evening's conversation, including Martha's tirade, was now preserved in digital clarity. I splashed cool water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, and returned to the dining room long enough to whisper to Robert that I wasn't feeling well and would be calling a car. Service home. He nodded distractedly, still caught in his mother's gravitational pull. As I slipped out the front door into the cool night air, tears streamed silently down my face. I replayed Martha's words and Robert's damning silence. But beneath the pain, a new resolve was forming. This wouldn't be the life my daughter inherited. Something had to change. And clearly, I would have to be the one to change it. The recording of Martha's dinner speech became both my torment and my strength in the days that followed. I listened to it repeatedly alone in our bedroom, each playback hardening my resolve. Robert had called twice from his mother's house that night, but hadn't come home until the following afternoon, offering weak excuses about helping with post-party cleanup. When he arrived, I was calm. Having spent the night researching therapists specializing in family dynamics and toxic relationships, I've made an appointment for myself with Dr. Sarah Levinson, I informed him, my voice steady. Asterisk, I recommend you find someone to talk to as well. He started to protest, but faltered when I met his gaze directly. Something in my expression silenced his objections. For the next 2 weeks, I operated with quiet determination. I consulted with a financial advisor about establishing my own accounts. I reconnected with nursing colleagues about accelerating my return to work. I began documenting every instance of Martha's boundary violations with dates, times, and details. I reached out to my own family and old friends, rebuilding the support network I'd allowed to atrophy during my absorption into Robert's world. Through therapy, I gained clarity about the dynamics at play, Martha's narcissistic control, Robert's codependency, and my own complicity in allowing boundaries to be trampled. I wasn't blameless. I had surrendered pieces of myself in hopes of being accepted. No more. After a month of preparation, with my plans in place and my confidence rebuilt, I waited until Lily was asleep one evening to confront Robert. I need you to listen to something, I said, placing my phone on the kitchen table between us. I pressed play. Martha's voice filled the room, her words from the birthday dinner cutting through the air once again. Robert's face drained of color as he heard it all. And then, the most damning moment, his silence. When the recording finished, he looked up at me, shock and shame warring in his expression. I had no idea it sounded that bad, he whispered. You were there, I replied evenly. Asterisk, you heard every word and said nothing. The recognition in his eyes told me he couldn't deny it. That night marked the beginning of honest conversation in our marriage. Robert admitted his fear of standing up to his mother, his lifelong pattern of compliance to maintain peace and secure his position in the family. The money, the connections, the family name, it's all I've ever known, he confessed. The thought of losing it all is terrifying. I laid out my position without ultimatums, but with absolute clarity. I won't raise Lily in an environment where her mother is undermined and disrespected. I won't model acceptance of emotional abuse as a normal family dynamic. You need to decide what matters more, your mother's approval or your own family's well-being. The following week, Robert attended his first therapy session. He also reached out to his estranged brother, James, who provided sobering perspective on Martha's manipulative tactics over the years. She isolated each of us, made us compete for her approval, and punished independence by withdrawing financial support, James explained during a long video call. When I finally broke free, it was terrifying at first, then the most liberating experience of my life. Robert also discovered from his sister Elizabeth that Martha had systematically alienated multiple family members who had shown signs of independence, fabricating conflicts and spreading damaging rumors to maintain her position of control. With this new awareness, Robert and I developed a plan. We would present a united front to Martha, establishing clear boundaries with real consequences for violations. Robert would inform her that he was declining his role as executor of her estate and removing himself from consideration for inheritance. After careful preparation and role-playing scenarios with our therapists, we scheduled a meeting with Martha at our home, neutral territory where we controlled the environment. When she arrived, her expression shifted from smugness to weariness upon finding both of us waiting calmly at the kitchen table. No Lily in sight to distract or manipulate the situation. "Mother," Robert began, his voice surprisingly steady, "Emma and I need to discuss some changes in our family dynamics with you." Martha's posture stiffened as Robert methodically outlined our boundaries. No unannounced visits, no undermining our parenting decisions, no disparaging comments about either of us, especially to or in front of Lily. Furthermore, he continued, maintaining eye contact despite her increasingly thunderous expression, "I've decided to remove myself as executor of your estate. I'm also declining my inheritance and any financial entanglements with the family business." Martha's face contorted with rage and disbelief. "This is her doing," she hissed, jabbing a finger toward me. "She's poisoned you against your own mother, your own legacy." Robert shook his head. "This is my decision based on years of manipulation and control I've only recently recognized. Emma has helped me see it, but the choice is mine." Martha's tactics shifted rapidly from rage to tears, from accusations to pitiful pleas about being abandoned in her old age. When these had no effect, she resorted to threats. "You'll be cut off completely. Everything you have, your position, your connections, all of it exists because of me." Robert remained calm. "I'm a qualified surgeon with my own career. We've paid off the mortgage on this house with our own money. We don't need your wealth, and the price of it has become too high." After Martha stormed out, promising retribution and family-wide condemnation, Robert and I held each other in the quiet kitchen, both shaken but resolute. The aftermath was predictably dramatic. Martha attempted to rally family members against us, but her efforts backfired when many shared their own stories of her manipulative behavior. Some relatives did choose sides, creating painful rifts, but others expressed quiet support for our boundaries, some even admitting they wished they'd done the same years ago. The months following our confrontation with Martha were challenging but transformative. Robert and I committed to weekly couples therapy, creating space to address not just the damage from his mother's interference, but the foundational issues in our own relationship. "I failed you," Robert acknowledged during one particularly emotional session. "Every time I stayed silent, every time I made excuses for her behavior, I was betraying our partnership. I'm so sorry, Emma." His genuine remorse and consistent efforts to make amends gradually rebuilt the trust between us. We decided to sell the house Martha had helped purchase and move to a smaller home in a different neighborhood, one we could afford entirely on our own incomes. The process of downsizing was surprisingly liberating. Each item we discarded or donated represented another step toward independence from Martha's influence. Robert reconnected with his brother James and his family, forging a relationship that had been denied them for years. James' children, cousins Lily had never met, became regular playmates, creating the extended family bonds Martha had actively prevented. His sister Elizabeth began visiting more frequently as well, admitting she'd always admired my strength but had been afraid to show support openly. "Mother has always punished any perceived disloyalty," she explained over coffee in our new kitchen. "Watching you two break free has given me courage to create some distance myself." Martha continued her attempts at manipulation through intermediaries, sending messengers with reminders of what Robert was giving up or updates on family members who still enjoyed her financial support. She sent extravagant gifts to Lily with notes implying we couldn't provide such luxuries ourselves. Each was returned unopened. After 3 months of absolute resistance to our boundaries, Martha's approach began to shift. She sent a carefully worded letter requesting a supervised visit with Lily, acknowledging, though not apologizing, for her perhaps overzealous involvement in our lives. After discussion with our therapist, we agreed to a short visit in a public park with both of us present. That first reunion was awkward, Martha clearly restraining herself from criticizing everything from Lily's clothing to our parenting choices, but she maintained control. Subsequent visits gradually increased in length and comfort, though always with clear parameters. Martha never explicitly apologized for her behavior, but her compliance with our boundaries represented a significant shift in the power dynamics. She had recognized at last that her only access to her granddaughter would be on our terms. As Lily grew from baby to toddler, I watched her develop a strong sense of self, one I hoped would protect her from the kind of manipulation that had ensnared her father. Robert, too, continued his journey toward independence, declining a position in the family business to accept a more fulfilling role at a teaching hospital. My own return to nursing brought renewed purpose and professional satisfaction, and the balance we struck between careers and family life was messy but authentic and entirely our own. On quiet evenings after Lily's bedtime, Robert and I often reflected on our journey. "I never understood what real strength was," he told me one night on our modest back porch, "until I watched you stand up to my mother." The porch was so different from Martha's manicured gardens, yet so much more genuinely ours. "You taught me that family isn't about bloodlines or inheritances," he said. "It's about choosing each other every day." That truth became my anchor through the ongoing challenges of maintaining boundaries with Martha and navigating the occasional family tensions that still erupted around holidays and significant events. I realized that belonging isn't to something others grant you, it is something you claim for yourself, through self-respect and courage. True family, the kind worth having, is built on mutual respect, honesty, and support, not manipulation and control. The most valuable inheritance we could give our daughter wasn't wealth or social standing, but the example of parents who valued authenticity over appearance, who chose difficult truths over comfortable lies. If you're facing similar struggles with toxic family dynamics, remember this: you have the right to establish boundaries, even with those who claim their interference is motivated by love. Blood relationships don't entitle anyone to mistreat you. And standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential for your well-being and for the health of your immediate family. Real belonging comes from being accepted as your authentic self, not from contorting yourself to meet impossible standards. Has someone in your family tried to make you feel like an outsider? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to hear more insights about navigating complex family relationships and building resilience. Thank you for listening to my journey from seeking approval to finding the courage to define. Family on my own terms. Remember, you deserve respect, no matter what family name you bear.